Hello students, welcome to my business law lecture series. Today we are going to learn quasi contract from the fourth chapter of business law, quasi contract, discharge of contract and remedies for breach of contract. Before going further, let us see one example. Assume that you are in a road to your college and in the road you have recognized one diamond ring and you know that it's not belongs to you and it belongs to some other person who has paused in that road. What you'll do regarding this ring? Either you reserve it or you find out that person and return that ring. Suppose it's a normal situation, but business law defines the thing what you have to do. Even though there is no contract between you and the person who has lost the ring, but law defines the things that you need. So in today's class, we are going to learn these kind of contracts. There is no contract, there is no direct contract between these two persons. This lady haven't told you that she's going to lose the ring and you have to return. But you have to return the ring to true owner according to our business law. So these kind of contracts are going to call as quasi contract. The term quasi derived from Latin word which means as if or resembles. Even though there is direct contract, law assumes that there is a contract. It resembles like a contract. For that reason, it's considered as if or resemble. Obligations and rights which are not derived from a contract between the parties. The two parties haven't entered the contract, but which is imposed by law, which assumes that there existence of a contract. Law defines the obligations and duties of the parties to contract. It's also called as implied contract or constructive contract. Quasi contract ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಕಾಂಟ್ರಾಕ್ಟಿಂಗ್ ಪಾರ್ಟೀಸ್ಗಳು ಯಾವುದೇ ಅಗ್ರಿಮೆಂಟ್ಸ್ಗಳನ್ನ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಸಿ ಇನ್ ದ ಪ್ರೀವಿಯಸ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಗೂಡ್ಸ್ನ ನಾನು ಕಳ್ಕೊಳ್ತೇನೆ ಅದನ್ನು ಹುಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ನಿಮ್ಮೊಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಯಾರೂ ಕಾಂಟ್ರಾಕ್ಟನ್ನು ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡಿರೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಬಟ್ ಈವನ್ ದೆನ್ ಕಳ್ಕೊಂಡಿರುವಂಥ ಗೂಡ್ಸಿನ ಟ್ರೂ ಓನರ್ಗೆ ನೀವು ಆ ಗೂಡ್ಸನ್ನು ವಾಪಸ್ ತಗೊಂಡೋಗಿ ಕೊಡ್ತೀರಾ. ಇದು ನಿಮ್ಮ ಲಯಬಿಲಿಟಿ ಆಗಿರ್ತದೆ. ನೀವು ಆ ರೀತಿ ಮಾಡಬೇಕಾದಂಥ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಡ್ಯೂಟಿ ಆಗ್ತದೆ, ಆಬ್ಲಿಗೇಷನ್ಸ್ ಆಗಿರ್ತದೆ. ಅಗೇನ್ ಯಾರು ಗೂಡ್ಸನ್ನ ಕಳ್ಕೊಂಡಿರ್ತಾರೆ ಅವರಿಗೆ ಅದು ರೈಟ್ಸ್ ಆಗ್ತದೆ ಅವರ ಆ ಗೂಡ್ಸ್ ಅನ್ನು ವಾಪಸ್ ತಗೊಳ್ಳುವಂಥದ್ದು. ಹಾಗಿದ್ರೆ ಈ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಆಬ್ಲಿಗೇಷನ್ಸ್ ಮತ್ತು ಟ್ರೂ ಓನರ್ನ ರೈಟ್ಸ್ ಏನಿದೆ ಇದನ್ನ ಡಿರೈವ್ ಮಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಯಾವುದೇ ಕಾಂಟ್ರಾಕ್ಟ್ ಇಲ್ಲದೆ ಇದ್ರೂ ಕೂಡ ಲಾ ಅಸ್ಯೂಮ್ ಮಾಡ್ತದೆ ಕಾಂಟ್ರಾಕ್ಟ್ ಇದೆ ಈ ಇಬ್ಬರು ಪಾರ್ಟೀಸ್ನ ಮಧ್ಯೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ. ಹೀಗೆ ಲಾ ಅಸ್ಯೂಮ್ ಮಾಡುವಂಥ ಕಾಂಟ್ರಾಕ್ಟ್ಸ್ಗಳನ್ನ ನಾವು ಕ್ವಾಸಿ ಕಾಂಟ್ರಾಕ್ಟ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. The direct contract which resembles like a contract. So for that reason, it's also called as implied contract or constructive contract. So there are many examples for quasi contract, like a statutory liability of lunatics or infants for supply of necessaries, a right to recover the money paid by mistake, or surety's right of indemnity. So all these are the examples of quasi contract. Section 68 to 72 of Indian Contract Act 1872, which deals with the circumstances or the situations of quasi-contract. Under these situations, law is going to assume that there exists a contract, and that contract are called as quasi-contract. So first one, claim for necessaries is applied to persons of incapable of contracting. So if necessaries is applied to incapable of contracting, we are going to consider as quasi-contract. Reimbursement of a person paying money which is due by another person. And the third situation, obligations to pay for non-gracious acts, responsibilities of finder of goods, and the last one, money paid by mistake or coercion. In all these five situations, we are going to consider it as quasi contract. And law assumes that there is a contract. So for that reason, law defines the obligations and rights of those parties. Let us see one by one in detail. The first one, claim for necessaries is applied to persons of incapable of contracting, so which is defined under section 68. So here, let us see one example. So this child, Ramya, lost everything in a flood. And for that reason, Sumitra taken her to her home and provided the necessaries like food, clothing, shelter. In that situation, Sumitra can claim for the necessaries supplied to this girl. Again, provided some conditions to be fulfilled. So here, the conditions. The first one, necessaries of life indicates which is not restricted to basic requirement of existence, so which also includes some life skills. Here, Sumitra provided the basic necessaries, so the first conditions fulfilled. Second one, necessaries should suitable to the condition. So here Sumitra provided the necessaries which is required by Ramya. So the second condition is also fulfilled. Necessaries at the time of sale and delivery. So at the time when it is required, Sumitra provided the thing. Deprived of necessities. So here incapable of contracting shouldn't have such necessaries. So if Ramya has the house, in that situation there is no need to provide again the house by Sumitra. So the fourth condition also fulfilled. Non-gracious supply. So here gracious activity includes the activities which is out of kindness, sympathy or to get some favor. If Sumitra provided the necessaries to Ramya only out of some kindness or to show some sympathy or to get some favor, in that situation, Sumitra cannot claim for the amount for the necessaries supplied to Ramya. Only under non gracious supply, which means Sumitra should have some business ideas in her mind while delivering the necessaries to Ramya. In such situation only we can consider it as a quasi contract. If she provided the necessaries out of kindness, sympathy, or favor, we cannot consider this as a quasi contract. Persons incapable of entering into contract. The necessaries provided to the person who should be incapable of entering into contract. So here incapable person includes minor, lunatics, or idiots. So here Ramya is a minor. For that reason, this condition also fulfilled. Not personally liable. Of course, Sumitra can claim for the amount from Ramya only if Ramya having some amount. If Ramya didn't have any amount to pay for Sumitra, in that situation, Sumitra cannot claim anything. So here, response reasonable price. So for the necessaries supplied, Sumitra can claim only reasonable amount. For example, she has provided the shelter and she has provided the food. So for that thing, Sumitra cannot claim 1 lakh rupees per month from Rami. She can claim only the reasonable amount of prevailing in that area. So, in order to consider the contract between these two parties as quasi contract, so these conditions should be fulfilled. So, if all the conditions are fulfilled, we can consider it as a quasi contract for the necessaries supplied to incapable of contracting. The second one, reimbursement of a person paying money due by another, which is defined under section 69. So here consider an example. Mr. Anil is the owner of a house and he provided this house to Mr. Sunil under lease. Sunil has provided has paid the lease amount to Mr. Anil, and Anil have to make payment of house tax to the government. Anil failed to make the tax payment to government. So for that reason, government intends to seize the house from Sunil. But Sunil already paid the lease amount. So for that reason, in order to retain the house as well as the lease amount, he paid the amount on behalf of Mr. Anil to the government. He paid the tax amount to the government on behalf of the owner of house to protect the lease amount already paid as well as to retain the house. So in this situation, Mr. Sunil is having all the rights to get the reimbursement for the money which is due by Mr. Anil. Again, which is subjected to some conditions. So here we can see the conditions. The payment made should be bona fide for the protection of one's own interest. So here Sunil paid the tax to government to protect his own interest. So here his interest is to retain the lease amount already paid as well as to retain the house. So the first condition fulfilled. And the second one, the payment must be such as the other party was bound by law to pay. So here, payment of tax on house is due by Mr. Anil and not by Mr. Sunil. So here, Anil is bound by law to make the payment, but on behalf of Mr. Anil, Sunil paid the amount. So the second condition also fulfilled. The third one, the payment should not be a voluntary one. So here, Mr. Sunil paid the amount on behalf of Mr. Anil, but it's not a voluntary. So, for that reason, the third condition also failed. So, for that reason, law presumes that there exists a quasi contract between Mr. Sunil and Mr. Anil. For that reason, the amount or the tax paid by Mr. Sunil to government is reimbursable by Sunil. Sunil has to make the reimbursement of tax amount paid by Mr. Sunil. So that is the amount or the reimbursement of person paying money due by another person. The third situation, obligations to pay for non-gracious act, which is defined under section 70. So let us assume that Mr. Kiran is a property owner and he went to outside or some other cities for some other work. At that particular point of time, fire accident happened in his building. And this particular point of time, his friend Abhishek came and rescued the building. So in this situation, after this situation, Abhishek wants to claim the amount from Mr. Kiran for his activity, for the activity of saving the building. He wants to claim the amount from Mr. Kiran. Again, which can be considered as a quasi contract, even though there is no contract between Abhishek and Kiran to rescue the building. Law presumes that there is a contract. So there exists a quasi contract between Kiran and Abhishek, provided the fulfillment of some conditions. So let us see the conditions. The act must have done or the things must have been delivered lawfully. Of course, the object of the contract should be lawful. So here, rescuing the building is a lawful object. So the first condition fulfilled. Second one, the person doing the act or delivering the things must not have done it graciously. So here the term meaning gracious means the activity done out of sympathy, kindness, or to get some favor. So if Abhishek did the activity due to some kindness or to show some sympathy or to get some favor in such situation, so we cannot consider this as a quasi contract. Only if Abhishek saved the building along with some business ideas, in that situation only we can consider it as a quasi contract. The third one, the person for whom the act is done must have enjoyed the act or thing. So here, rescuing building or saving building from fire accident is the object of a contract, and Mr. Kiran should get some advantage from this activity. Of course, he has got the advantage from rescuing building. So for that reason, the third condition is also fulfilled. So here you should remember that it should not be a gracious act. If the activity is out of kindness or some sympathy in that situation, the party cannot claim for such an activity. In other cases, the parties can claim for the activity. Even though there exists no contract, law presumes the existence of contract. So that is told by payment for non-gracious act. And the fourth one, responsibility of finder of goods. You have seen in the example. So if you find anything which lost by some other person, in that situation, the person who has found out the articles should do some duty, should pay some obligations or responsibility. The law defines the responsibility of finder of lost goods. So here the duty is of take care of goods as much as a man of ordinary prudence. They should take care of the goods as a responsible person. Should not use the goods for personal use. So you got a diamond ring, but you don't have the right to use it, right to wear a ring. So you should keep the ring with yourself, but you don't have the right to wear it. So you should not use the goods for personal use. To take the necessary measures to trace the true owner. At the same time, you should take the necessary steps to trace the true owner of such goods. Either you should give the police complaint or you should give the announcement in newspaper or whatever the things that you should do some activities to find out the true owner. Must hand over the goods when the true owner on his demand. When the true owner traced, we should transfer the goods to true owner. So these are all the obligations that you should do when you find out the goods which is lost by some other person. And the next one, rights. Suppose you got some goods which belongs to some other person, then in that situation you have some rights. So here the rights are can retain the goods till the true owner traced. So until the true owner traced, you can retain the goods with you. But remember, you don't have the rights to use it. You can retain. Can receive all the expenditure of preserving the goods. So you can claim all the expenditure uh, to preserve the goods with you from the true owner of goods at the time of delivering the goods to true owner. Can retain the goods until the expenditure on it recovered from the true owner. Can retain the goods with yourself until the true owner paid the expenditure to you. Can claim the reward offered by the true owner for finding or returning. So here you can claim the expenditure as well as the reward which is offered by the true owner for finding and returning the goods. So if the true owner announced some rewards for finding lost goods, you can claim those rewards also. Can sell the goods in some remote cases, like the goods find is perishable in nature, owner cannot be found out. So in some remote cases, you can sell the goods. For example, to, here you have found out, in this example, you have found out the diamond ring. In case if you got some removable goods, like you have got two packets of milk, can you retain the milk for 2 weeks? Definitely no. Or can you retain the milk for 1 year? No. If it is non-perishable goods like diamond, you can keep or retain the goods for a longer period. But if it is a perishable nature, in such situation, you have to sell the goods. So in that situation, you are having the right to sell the goods. So remember, only in the remote cases you can sell the goods also. So these are the rights defined by the law under quasi contract. And the last one, mistake or coercion. So in any case, so if you have paid some amount to person by mistake, in that situation you have all the right to recover. So for example, amount mistakenly credited to B's account instead of A's account. So here B account can be debited to the same extent by the, so here amount paid by mistake, in such situation have all the rights to recover the amount from that person, even though there exists no contract between the parties. In today's class, we have learned regarding quasi contract, the meaning of term quasi, and again we have seen the circumstances of quasi contract. Let us see some questions so that you can recall. First one, right to recover money paid by mistake is an example for contingent contract, contract of indemnity, contract of pledge, or quasi contract. You can easily guess the answer is quasi contract. The term quasi means resembles, to relate, to correlate, to realize. Which means answer A, resemble. Obligations and rights which are not derived from a contract between the parties but imposed by law, presuming the existence of a contract, which is called as contingent contract, contract of indemnity, contract of pledge, or quasi contract. Who's the answer? Quasi contract. Pick the odd man out. Implied contract, constructive contract, mercantile contract, or quasi contract. Which is the odd one here? The odd one is mercantile contract, and all other three are the synonym of quasi contract, either implied or constructive contract. Thank you for watching and happy life.